Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Having to start the morning with a sidebar conference, I don't know if that's a good sign. All right, let the record reflect that Detective Tom Lange is again on our witness stand. He is on re-cross-examination by Mr. Cochran. Good morning, Detective Lange.
Morning, Your Honor.
Detective, you're reminded you are still under oath. Mr. Cochran, you may conclude your re-cross-examination.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Good morning, Detective Lange. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Detective Lange, have you had occasion to speak to Ms. Clark about your testimony since you got off the stand yesterday?
I don't believe we spoke.
You didn't spoke last night?
I saw her briefly last night. There was some discussion.
You had some brief discussion last night?
Yes.
And that's about your redirect?
No, it was more or less what happened yesterday in court regarding your cross-examination.
Okay, so you just discussed that. Very well. That was last night up in her office, is that correct?
I saw her briefly in her office, yes.
All right, sir. Now, yesterday you mentioned seeing a video last Friday wherein you saw some candles burning, I presume, inside the living room area of the Bundy address. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was video from some TV photographer or video camera. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, you could tell. All right. Now, a few questions about this blanket that we saw in the video we showed you yesterday. Do you know where that blanket came from?
I believe the inside of the house.
So it was a video that strike that. It was a blanket inside the Brown Simpson home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it was taken out of there. Do you know what kind of material this blanket was made of?
I believe it was cotton.
And who took this blanket out and put it over the body? Who did that?
I did.
And where'd you find this blanket, sir?
Inside the house.
I understand that. Whereabouts inside the house?
I believe someone might have retrieved it for me from upstairs somewhere. I don't recall.
All right, so that all you know, it was brought down to you, and then you used it. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And as I understand from your testimony yesterday and looking at the video, the last time you saw that blanket was left on the ground when you left the location about 12 o'clock on June 13th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, yesterday you shared with us some thoughts about when you were searching the condo in this superficial search for drug material. And I think you said you looked around the condo. Is that correct?
I did.
Did you ever actually look inside any drawers in any of the rooms yourself?
I don't believe I did on that particular morning.
All right. Did you search through any closets on that particular morning, June 13th?
I did look into closets. As far as actually searching and removing items, no, but I did look in the closets.
All right. Did you search in the garage area and any cabinets that may have been located in that garage area, sir?
I did not enter any cabinets, no.
Did you search under the beds or any of the mattresses under the bed at all?
I believe I peered under the bed. I don't recall.
And with regard to the photographer yesterday we had in the video, is Mr. Rokar a sworn police personnel?
No.
He's a photographer hired by which division is he assigned?
Scientific Investigation Division.
Is he a full-time employee, if you know?
I don't believe anymore. I believe he's off with a health problem.
All right, he's not there now, but he was back in June, of course.
Yes.
Right. Was he full-time at that time, sir?
I believe he was.
Now, with regard to yesterday, we talked briefly about drug killings and asked some questions about them. You have found in your experience, have you not, that very often when a drug killing is to send a message, they are also crimes of rage. Isn't that correct?
When a message is sent?
Yes, when the killing is to send a message, they're very often crimes of rage. Isn't that correct?
Well, I guess that's open to interpretation.
Well, sir, I imagine that everything is, as you've shared your interpretation with us. I'm asking you now about drug killings. It's true, is it not, that sometimes when you have these Colombian necklace killings we talked about yesterday are crimes of rage. Isn't that correct?
I've never handled a Colombian necklace killing. I would imagine, however, if someone were to kill someone, that there'd certainly be some rage involved to that extent.
And where you talked before about overkill, sometimes you see in these crimes of message that there's overkill also. Isn't that correct, sir?
Yes.
Now, at Rockingham, you spoke about the Bronco, and I think at one point you talked about a left-hand side door handle. Do you recall your testimony in that regard?
Yes.
Doesn't mean someone couldn't open the door with their right hand, does it?
They could, but it would be in an awkward position.
All right, so your answer is it could be open with your right hand or either hand. Isn't that correct?
Certainly.
Objection to the state's testimony.
Overruled.
Now, in that connection, sir, you also shared with us that you believed that at the time, I believe you first saw this eraser head size spot on the Bronco, that the doors of the Bronco were locked. Did you so indicate?
I believe they were locked.
Did you ever check the handles? You go and touch the handle with your left hand so it wouldn't be awkward and make a determination of whether those doors were locked?
I never touched the vehicle.
So that was just your belief that it was locked. You never checked it, right, at that point?
That's correct.
Did you look inside that Bronco, either with a naked eye or with a flashlight, and look inside to see if you saw any blood inside there at that point, on June 13th?
I peered in the rear of the vehicle and observed some items in the rear. It did not peer into the front.
I couldn't hear you. You dropped your voice.
I did not peer into the front. I peered to the rear of the vehicle and observed some items in the rear.
All right. You were asked some questions about when Arnell told you that her father was in Chicago. In the statement that I read to you before, and I'll be glad to show it to you again, in that statement that was written by you in your report, you indicated that Miss Arnell Simpson said that her father was in Chicago. Isn't that correct?
I believe so.
All right. In that statement, you don't mention anything at all about Kathy Randa or what she heard from Kathy Randa, do you?
I don't believe I do.
Now, with regard to this particular case, are you aware that when Mr. Simpson returned from Chicago voluntarily and arrived at Rockingham, he was immediately handcuffed by the police there? Are you aware of that?
I had seen that, yes.
You saw that on video?
That's correct.
You weren't there at that point, is that correct?
That's correct.
You were at or about that time still, as far as you know, you were at Bundy, and then you then went downtown to have this conversation with Mr. Simpson. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know if he was handcuffed when he went downtown? Did you
I
take
don't
it out
believe
there?
he was.
He was handcuffed at the scene, is that correct?
When he initially arrived, I believe one of the officers on the perimeter did handcuff him briefly, yes.
Now, with regard to, you mentioned that Mr. O.J. Simpson had a cut finger on his left hand, is that correct?
That's correct.
And he gave you an explanation of how he got that cut on his left hand, did he not?
Objection, Your Honor.
I can answer that. You can answer that yes or no.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Yes.
Sustained.
An explanation, yes or no?
Sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor, because you were going to check something anyway on this. We ended on this yesterday. May we approach?
Yes. All right, thank you, counsel. Mr. Cochran?
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you discuss with Mr. Simpson his cut finger? You answer that
Yes.
yes or no? And was that when you were downtown at the Parker Center after 1:30 on June 13th, 1994, sir?
Yes.
Now, as part of your investigation here, did you send officers to Chicago as part of the investigation?
Yes, I did.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
And what was the name of the officers you sent to Chicago?
Detectives Looper,
I'd like to make him my own witness for this point, Your Honor. I know he'll be available.
Oh.
She's
Hold on.
arguing, Your Honor.
Hold on. Overruled. Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. What is the name of the officer or officers that you sent to Chicago, sir, in this case?
Detectives Looper, L-U-P-E-R, and LaFall, capital L-E, capital F-A-L-L.
And can you tell us, Detective, when they went to Chicago as part of this investigation?
I believe it was shortly after the murders, a week or so, 10 days, I don't recall exactly,
A week
perhaps
or so,
longer,
a week or so after June 12th? Is that correct?
perhaps. I don't have the log in front of me.
Now, in the course of your investigation, sir, you had an extensive search conducted looking for bloody clothes and looking for a bloody knife or knives. Isn't that correct?
There were searches, yes.
All right. And where all did you have searched? Where did you have searched?
Same
connection.
objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
There were searches for bloody clothing around the location at Bundy, trash cans at the location, the dumpster in the adjoining condominium, the alleyway, the shrubberies around the house, immediate area. There was searches conducted on foot between the Bundy and the Rockingham locations, various trash cans, trash containers. There was a vacant field off of Sunset that was searched, as were several areas that came to our attention by various leads that we received that are documented.
And you documented all these searches. Did you search in Chicago, Illinois?
There was a search in Chicago, yes.
And was that done by Chicago police or by Detectives Looper and LaFall, if you know?
Both.
So when they went back, they also searched, but you'd also had it done by Chicago police who worked with you. Is that correct?
The Chicago police assisted us.
And during the course of these various searches, a number of weapons were turned in. Is that correct? Or you found a number of weapons?
There were some knives that were found, yes.
Did you find any bloody clothes?
Same
No.
objection, Your Honor.
Now, with regard to this case, you shared with us yesterday that you had interviewed some 170 witnesses or thereabouts. Is that correct?
I believe there's something like 170 formal interviews, yes.
Formal interviews, and you've also been all around the world and talking to people in connection with this investigation. Isn't that correct? Are you
I
an
haven't
investigator?
physically been around the world. We've had information we've received from various parts of the world, yes.
Well, by that connection, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about you as the lead investigator. You've had occasion to have people go to places around the world in the course of this investigation. Isn't that correct?
I wouldn't say around the world in
Well-
this country.
Okay. Well, haven't you had somebody go to Italy?
I have not, no.
Have you had anybody in connection? One of the investigators in this case go to Italy.
I have not. I believe the district attorney's office may have.
All right. Well, that's part of the prosecution team, is it, sir?
Yes, but that wasn't done in my direction.
All right. Have you had individuals go to New York?
Yes,
You had individuals go to Connecticut?
yes.
Individuals go to Alaska?
Your objection, this is all vague. For what purpose?
Overruled.
Alaska?
I don't recall Alaska.
Miami? Florida?
I don't know if we sent,
Vague. Is this for bloody clothing? What?
Overruled.
Miami, Florida?
I don't recall sending anyone to Florida.
Bahamas?
In this case, no.
What other jurisdictions have you sent people to under your jurisdiction?
Alabama.
All right. Any other states?
There may be one or two others. I don't recall.
Can't think of them now.
That's correct.
Any foreign jurisdictions?
I don't recall sending anyone to a foreign jurisdiction.
Now, in the ice cream, what about Missouri? Send somebody to Missouri?
Yes, there was someone sent to Missouri.
In the ice cream example that we talked about yesterday, that there were photographs of the Ben & Jerry ice cream, so that we're clear, in the test done by the detective, that particular ice cream in the container melted in about an hour and 15 minutes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, are you aware of a lady by the name of Cora Fishman?
Yes.
And have you had occasion to review any statements taken from her?
Objection beyond scope.
Sustained.
With regard to Cora Fishman, you're aware that she was a friend of
Objection beyond scope.
Sustained.
Mr. Cora Fishman, Your Honor? I would ask Lee. Mayor Pritchett.
Yes. Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor. Regarding your theory that you shared with us, I guess day before yesterday now, regarding the fact that there was only one killer here, would you agree that you would not be able to rule out a second killer if one of the assailants at the scene had been standing in the dirt area and either walked out before Ms. Simpson started to bleed or walked out as you did without getting blood on his or her feet? Agree with that? That would tend to indicate that, debunk your theory of a single killer?
Objection that causes speculation.
Overruled.
No, it wouldn't.
It wouldn't if somebody was in the dirt and walked out and you never were aware they were there. That wouldn't debunk your theory about a single killer?
With the amount of blood at that location, I would have seen some kind of a shoe print going through that blood the other way.
But, sir, the part of the question I ask you was if the person walked out before the blood had started to flow. If that had taken place, then you would not know, would you? Isn't that correct, sir?
I'm sorry?
You would not know, would you, sir?
If someone had left prior
Yes.
to the killing?
No, left prior to Mr. Cole Brown Simpson starting to bleed, as she did so profusely.
Probably not.
All right, that's all I was asking you. Now, yesterday you shared with us the fact that you had, one of the publications you looked at was a publication by Lemoyne Schneider. You only have only one copy. I want to show portions of this to counsel. And approach the witness.
Council's not.
How many pages is this, Mr. Cochran?
Your Honor, it is,
Perhaps we could have one of the law clerks step in.
it's about 7 pages, Your Honor. I want to use portions of several of the pages.
All right, let's,
And I can, while you're doing that,
All right.
please, I can
Let's have
do
this.
something else in the end.
All right. Five copies. Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor. This publication we're about to get, that's Lemoyne Schneider, and that's a book on homicide investigations that you referred to yesterday. Is that correct?
There is a book by Lemoyne Schneider on homicide investigations, yes. Several editions, I believe.
All right. Do you recall what edition that you had read some 10 or 15 years ago?
No.
You don't at this point?
No.
With regard to, Ms. Clark asked you several days ago whether or not you had seen any pay and owe notes, I presume pay and owe notes being some indication that somebody owed for some drugs obtained. You remember those questions?
Those are those types of notes sometimes with people who are involved in narcotics, yes.
Right. You recall being asked about that, right?
Yes, I do.
Did you ever at any time go to Exodus and talk with or see Faye Resnick to see if she had any pay and owe notes at Exodus?
No.
Now, at the autopsy, you were present during the entire autopsy, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you see any photographs taken during the autopsy, specifically of Mr. Goldman's hands?
I believe there were photographs taken prior. Generally, what they will do is clean the bodies up and take photographs prior to the actual autopsy.
Well, I'd like to show you a photograph, of course, to be of Mr. Goldman's hand. Ask him the photograph. Again? Got a feed on it.
Yes.
It's a hand. Let's see. All right, do you recall whether or not you were present at or about the time that this photograph was taken of Mr. Goldman's hands at the coroner's office on or about June 14th, 1994?
It was probably, I'm sorry?
I broke in. I'm sorry. Appears to be a right hand.
A right hand, yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
I was not present for this particular photograph. I believe these were taken actually prior to autopsy and subsequent to the cleanup.
But you, in fact, saw Mr. Goldman's hand on that particular day, did you not?
Yes.
And with is this photograph a fair and accurate portrayal of the way his hands appeared at about that time? The bruises on the right hand and right knuckle area?
I believe so.
Then I'd like to mark this exhibit as defendant's 1050, if I can.
1050.
We're having that marked now at this point. And with regard to the hands of the individuals, and I want to have the court cut the feed and show another photograph.
1050.
I've shown counsel the photograph, which I'll now mark as defendant's 1051, if the court would allow. And, Your Honor, with counsel, I've blocked out the face, or tried to block out the face of this photograph, and the court may want to cut the feet.
All right.
Keep the feet cut. This is defendant's 1051. Can you see that? Can you pull it back a little bit, Mr. Harris, please? Sir. A little more. Were you present when you saw this particular photograph of apparently the right hand of Miss Nicole Brown Simpson with fingernails, etc., apparently being held by someone who has gloves on, examining those hands?
Yes.
And where was that photograph taken?
I recall those types of photographs being taken at the scene, but I cannot orient this particular one. I don't know where this was taken.
All right. Do you see the jewelry on the left hand of the person who's holding Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's hand? See the jewelry?
Yes.
And does that appear to you, seeing that jewelry, is that a refresh your recollection if that was perhaps a female who was wearing that kind of jewelry?
May well be. Doesn't refresh my recollection.
Well, at the scene, if this picture was taken at the scene, were there any other females there who would have been dealing with the bodies other than Miss Ratcliffe, the coroner's investigator that we've seen earlier?
No.
So it's best, your belief is it's probably Miss Ratcliffe, is that correct?
Sustained.
Well, who do you think that is?
I don't know.
Indicated he doesn't know.
All right, all right, thank you, Your Honor. Do you believe that picture was taken at the scene, however?
Again, I don't know. It may have been at the coroner's office.
All right, very well. Thank you very much. Now, you yesterday had indicated to us reading from or being aware of a publication by Lamone Snyder. And I think you've told us that you don't know the edition, but I think you told us it was somewhere perhaps 10 or 15 years ago. Is that correct?
Perhaps.
All right, I'd like to approach, and I have, the court has now provided us with some copies of this publication, and I'll just ask you to place a copy here for you. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions on that. And, Your Honor, I guess at this point I should probably mark this so that we have a number to refer to. And this would be defendant's 1052. Now,
Perhaps people could be allowed to read this before counsel begins his examination on the material. We have just as minute been given this by counsel.
All right, take a moment. appear to be check marks along the text. Is that
Yes, and those put down, we block
the
block
pertinent
those out.
areas?
Yes, Your Honor. You want me to ask another question? In a different area?
No, they need to be able to concentrate on what they're reading. There's a copy for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Reporter, you can stay there. I'm going to take a brief recess just so we're not all sitting here waiting for the council to finish reading these materials. They are technical materials, so they do need an opportunity to read them. I'm sure you understand the difficulty that we have when these things are just presented. I'm going to ask you to step back. Please remember my admonition to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves, form any opinions about the case. Don't talk to anybody about it. Don't let anybody talk to you. Don't perform any deliberations while you're back there, and we'll see you probably about 15, 20 minutes. All right? Thank you. Have you had the opportunity to finish reading that?
I have, Your Honor.
All right. Deputy McNair, let's have the jurors, please. Mr. Bailey, did you want to say something?
Sorry, Ron, I'm just anticipating the jury will come through the door.
All right, we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel again. Detective Lange, would you swing the microphone over there, please? All right, Mr. Cochran, you may continue.
Two more questions, Your Honor. Detective Lange, with regard to areas that were searched by you on or after June 13th or under your investigation, did you have any searches conducted of any airplanes going to Chicago or coming back from Chicago at all? Who's that?
I don't recall any searches of airplanes.
You don't recall whether or not the American Airlines plane was searched under your direction or under anyone's direction in this case?
I don't recall an airplane being searched.
And no laboratories in the airplanes either, is that right?
There was an inquiry regarding a laboratory on an airplane. I don't know if that was actually searched, though.
All right, sir. Now, just before the break, I had placed before you a publication entitled Homicide Investigation by Lemoyne Snyder. And this is an old edition, the 53 edition, and at that time it was the 7th printing. Have you had occasion to review any portions of the 7 or 8 pages which have been placed before you?
Yes.
All right, and I want to ask you just a few questions regarding this. With regard to,
Sustained.
and is this a publication by Lemoyne Snyder that you relied upon, that you spoke about yesterday when you talked about publications you relied upon in forming various opinions in this case?
It's one publication I have read, but I believe it was several years after this was printed.
Well, some things with regard to homicide investigations don't change from volume to volume, isn't that correct?
Certainly.
And I want to ask you a couple of questions if I can about it and ask you whether or not you agree with what's in the publication. There's something called...
This is not the publication you like?
Your Honor, this is published by the same author, and it's an earlier edition, but...
Is there a foundational objection?
Foundation.
Sustained.
Your Honor, with regard to this then, the edition that you read was... what printing was the edition that you read?
I don't recall.
All right. And with regard to that, you're not aware if there's any differences between this printing that I have before you here in Defendant's 1052 and the printing that you read some 10 or 15 years ago, are you?
I couldn't say.
All right. And for instance, with regard to the golden rule of homicide investigation, as far as you're concerned, that rule hasn't changed, has it?
Jim, you want to vote on it?
Sustained.
With regard to estimating the time of death, when you read, did you read that particular portion of the publication of Lemoyne and Snyder that you referred to yesterday in your testimony? Did you read that chapter dealing with estimating the time of death?
Same objection, Your Honor.
I can lay the foundation without asking
Well,
you.
you can ask him if he read it.
Yes.
Did you read that? And with regard to the estimating the time of death in Chapter 3, in the paper you have before you there, what you read 10 or 15 years ago is consistent, is it not, with what's there in this publication by the same author, an earlier printing. Isn't that correct?
It appears to be generally consistent, yes.
All right. I'd like to ask some questions, Your Honor, regarding that. If I might. Now, with regard to estimating the time of death, would you agree with the statement? Quote, "It is always important to know as nearly as possible the time when the victim expired. In the absence of witnesses, this information must be obtained from an examination of the body itself." Agree with that so far?
Yes.
Generally speaking, the sooner after death the body is found, the more definitely can the actual time of death be fixed. Agree with that so far?
Generally, yes.
However, it is usually impossible for anyone to establish accurately the hour and minute when life ceased. You agree with that?
Yes.
And so, with regard to the body, as you've told us, an examination of the body, that is done by the coroner. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And so, if this is a publication that you agreed with and I'll base your opinion on, do you agree that it would be important to, as nearly as possible after discovery of the body, to have the body examined by someone trained to do that, in this instance, the coroner? Is that a fair statement?
I would agree with what is written here, that it is generally speaking that would be important, yes.
All right. Now, I'd like to ask you whether or not you've ever heard of the golden rule of homicide investigation.
No.
Have you ever read the golden rule of homicide investigation as set forth on page 28 in the Lemoyne Snyder publication?
I don't recall seeing that, but since I read the book many years ago, I may well have.
All right. Well, let me ask you if you agree with this, and maybe it'll refresh your recollection. Do you agree that under the golden rule of homicide investigation, that one should never touch, change, or alter anything until identified, measured, and photographed? Agree with that so far?
Generally, that's correct, yes.
Remember that when a body or article has been moved, it can never be restored to its original position. Agree with that?
Yes.
Now, during the break, I was not able to speak with you in connection to this. Is that correct?
No, sir, that's not correct. We spoke outside.
We spoke in the restroom, but not about this particularly, did we?
Yes, sir, we did.
When you first left the stand, I went up to try and talk to you. The district attorneys tell you not to talk to me at that point?
No, they did not. They called me over to their table.
And I was not able to talk to you, isn't that correct?
Well, I
point?
can't talk to everyone at once.
Well, didn't you say that I'm on the stand, Mr. Cochran, I've got to go talk to them first? Did you say that?
I may have said something like that. They signaled me first, and so I walked over there, and you walked between us.
Well, wasn't I up standing by you, sir, just as the jury had left the room before they ever called you, and I started to talk to you, and Mr. Darden then called you, and then the others called you after that. Isn't that correct?
You were quicker to get over here, yes.
The judge had directed me over there, and I got there first. And then he walked past me and went over to talk to them. Isn't that correct?
You were quicker.
All right, well, I won't comment on that. Now, with regard to this publication called Homicide Investigation, sir, the part, I guess, on page 38 that deals with examination of stomach contents. You recall yesterday we talked about stomach contents, and I'd like to ask you whether or not these paragraphs dealing with stomach contents are consistent with what you read some 10 or 15 years ago when you read this publication and which you relied upon in formulating some of your opinions in this case.
Okay?
Okay, have you read that?
Yes.
And is that consistent with what you read some 10 or 15 years ago?
I can't say for sure. I
Look-
can't say.
All right, let me see if this will refresh your recollection at all then, and see if you agree with these statements. A procedure which is of great importance in fixing the time of death is the examination of the stomach contents.
Wait,
Agree with that?
Your Honor, this is hearsay as read to by counsel. The witness can read it to himself and determine whether or not.
Sustained.
All right, can you read this paragraph to yourself about the examination of stomach contents, I guess on page, this may be
39.
39, I believe, Your Honor. It goes over to page 40, right before the paragraph that says importance of associated events.
Yes.
Have you read that?
Yes.
Do you agree with what's contained in that paragraph?
Paragraph doesn't address the digestion process ceasing at the time of death.
The question is, do you agree with what's contained in this paragraph, sir?
Generally, yes.
All right. And this is consistent with what you read some 10 or 15 years ago about the importance of fixing the time of death and the use of the stomach contents in making that determination. Isn't that correct?
Yes, generally, yes.
All right. And would you agree with the statement, if I might, Your Honor, that if stomach contents are present, it is possible for the...
Objection, Your Honor. Objection.
What's the objection?
He relied upon this, Your Honor.
No, he did not rely upon this. He's told us repeatedly this is an earlier edition. That's number one.
That's not,
Number
just
two,
speaking objection, Your Honor.
counsel-
Speaking objection.
Sustained. It is a speaking objection. I'll see counsel at the sidebar.
Thank you.
If I hear another speaking objection from either side, the sanction is going to be $250. Thank you, Counsel. Mr.
Thank you,
Cochran.
Rick Kelly, Your Honor. Detective Lange, with regard to the paragraph that I'd ask you to read on the examination of stomach contents, I believe you've indicated to us that paragraph appears similar to a paragraph you may have read in some later edition. Is that a fair statement?
I'd say in a general sense, yes.
Right. And in the course of forming the opinions that you shared with us yesterday, you relied upon the contents of the Lemoyne Snyder publication that you read. Is that correct?
Relied upon it for what purpose?
Well, relied upon it from a standpoint of helping to form your opinion, opinions you shared, as this was a publication which you told us about yesterday, recall?
Yes, it's one publication I've read. It's not the only thing I've relied upon.
All right. I understand you relied upon other things. You had other experience, but this is something that you read and had relied upon. Isn't that correct, sir? To
In
some
a
degree.
general sense, I suppose one could say that.
All right. Well, based upon that, the question permission, I'd like to ask you just a few questions with regard to this particular paragraph and whether or not you agree with certain aspects regarding the importance of stomach contents.
Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you agree that if stomach contents are present, it is possible for the pathologist to tell with reasonable accuracy of what the last meal consisted? Agree with that principle?
Objection, Your Honor. This calls for speculation. It's beyond this witness's ability.
Oh, well,
Can you answer that?
I didn't see where you were reading.
I'm sorry, sir. I just somewhat paraphrased it, but second sentence. If stomach contents are present, you see that?
Yes.
It is possible for a pathologist or a doctor to tell with reasonable accuracy what the last meal consisted of.
That's what it says.
Agree with that?
I suppose it's possible.
All right. Do you agree also that the stomach will usually be empty and from 4 to 6 hours after a meal has been eaten? Do you agree with that principle?
If the digestion process has taken place, yes.
And if the stomach is found to be well filled with food and digestion of the contents, strike that. If the stomach is found to be well filled with food and digestion of the contents is not extensive, it's fair to assume that death followed shortly after the meal. Would you agree with that general principle?
Generally, yes.
Would you agree that this entire procedure, which is of great importance in fixing the time of death, is the examination of the stomach contents?
It's one general factor that could be used, yes.
Do you feel, as I've indicated and asked you, do you feel that it's, in addition to a general factor, a factor of great importance in fixing the time of death through the examination of the stomach contents?
I would not rely entirely on it. Again, it's one general factor of many.
That you would rely upon. All right? Continuing on.
Was that a question? I didn't hear that.
So you'd rely upon it. You would rely upon it along with other factors. Is that right?
Along with other things, I wouldn't specifically rely just on it.
All right, sir. If the stomach is entirely empty, death probably took place at least 4 to 6 hours after the last meal. Do you agree with that?
As a general statement, yes.
All right. And in addition, if the small intestine is also empty, the probability is that death took place 12 or more hours after food was last eaten. Do you agree with that?
These statements do not address the digestion process ceasing at the time of death, so I'm having a bit of a problem with them.
All right, well, let's go back, and I want to ask you about this statement, not what you just indicated, sir. If the small intestine is also empty, would you agree with the statement that the probability is that death took place 12 or more hours after food was last eaten? Do you agree with that? Is that a principle with which you agree?
Generally, yes.
And do you agree, finally, that the interpretation of the variations between these extremes must be left to the doctor making the examination? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this whole area is an area where we have doctors who are trained to look at these things, the stomach contents, and make a judgment. Is that correct, sir?
That's definitely correct, yes.
And you rely upon the forensic pathologist as a member of the team in your cases throughout your experience. Isn't that correct, sir?
I do.
Very well. Thank you very kindly, Detective Lang. Very much.
Ms. Clark.
Detective Lang, you indicated on the page 29 of this publication, says it is usually impossible for anyone to establish accurately the hour and minute when life ceased.
Yes,
And you indicated you agreed with that.
certainly.
And based upon your reading of these publications and your experience and training, what is the narrowest time frame that has ever been assigned by a coroner to time of death?
Object this one. Ever been assigned by a coroner? Objection. Say.
Sustained.
In your experience, sir, what is the narrowest you've ever been able to determine time of death, the narrowest time frame?
Without an eyewitness, never below 2 to 3 hours.
Have you ever been able to determine time of death to within 1 hour?
I've never heard of that.
And in this particular case, what was your estimation of the range of time for time of death for Ms. Simpson, Ms. Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman?
Objection. Objection.
And one of the 12, one of the 12 objections.
The objection is this is improper. Redirect, and also outside the, well, objection.
All right, beyond
Improper,
the scope. Beyond the scope. Overruled.
Sometime between 9 p.m. and midnight on the night of June 12th, 1994.
Could you have made that estimate any narrower had you called the coroner in at 4:30 instead of 8 o'clock?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Can we approach?
Yes. All right, thank you, counsel. Ms. Clark, you may continue.
All right, Detective Lange, in this particular case, what did you consider in terms of the factors that assisted you in determining the range of time between which death occurred for the victims?
I considered the last time that the victims were seen alive, considered their liver temperatures, I considered the time that they were discovered, and I considered the findings of the coroner's office.
Did you excuse me. Did you consider also the statements of witnesses, sir?
Leading the suggestion.
Overruled.
Yes, that would go to the last time that they were seen and the time that they were found.
Do you recall reviewing any statements concerning witnesses who lived in the neighborhood who heard dogs barking?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
Did that play any part in your determination as to the range of time within which death occurred?
Yes.
Had you called for the coroner to take a liver temperature at midnight, would that have been able to narrow the time frame that you came up with, that is between 9 and 12, any better?
Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation.
Overruled.
I don't believe so.
With respect to this publication also, sir, is there a section on page 30 and 31 concerning immediate signs of death?
Yes.
And does that talk about methods by which to establish that a person has in fact deceased?
Objection, Your Honor. The publication speaks for itself. This is improper.
Overruled.
Yes, it does.
And under number 3 on page 31, does it talk about a method of determining whether or not someone has died through their eyes?
The eyeballs and the changes in the pupil, yes.
Does it say anything about determining whether or not death has occurred by touching the eyeball?
Yes.
And what does it say in that regard?
Publication speaks. Objection.
Hearsay?
Hearsay.
Sustained.
There's a method there involving touching the eyeball, is that correct?
Excuse me, Ms. Clark, I'm sort of beyond the scope of the redirect.
Yes.
There's no
That's right.
controversy as to
About that.
issue, and I think Officer Risky testified to that.
I'll move on, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
All right, sir, you were directed by Mr. Cochran to look at the passage concerning the examination of stomach contents on page 39.
Yes.
And he read to you portions of that paragraph, do you recall?
Yes.
He did not read to you the first portion, the first sentence, did he?
Your Honor. Hearsay. Improper question. Counsel.
Order.
He did not read to you the first sentence, did he?
Objection. Misstatement, Your Honor.
Let me check here. Overruled.
I don't recall whether he did or not. Is that beginning with a procedure which is of great importance?
Right.
I don't recall.
Nevertheless, it indicates that a procedure that's of great importance in fixing time of death is examination of stomach contents.
Objection, Your Honor, to the
Is-
form of that, with regard to objection to the form of that question, because it was argumentative, the question need be phrased nevertheless.
Overruled.
Yes. That's correct.
Does it say anything in there about saving stomach contents?
No.
Throughout this entire passage, in fact, does it say anything about saving stomach contents?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Overruled.
No, it doesn't.
Does it talk about examination of stomach contents?
Yes, it does.
Was that done in this case,
Yes, it was.
as to both Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown,
That's correct.
in your presence?
That's correct.
Now, you spoke on recross examination about the subject matter of lividity,
Yes.
and in this particular publication on page 34, does it also discuss lividity?
Yes.
With respect to time of death, is there any indication here that you can be specific as to the time of death based on lividity?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading suggested.
Sustained.
Seconded.
What kind-
Leading and suggestive.
What kind of, according to this publication, sir, what kind of determination can you make with respect to time of death based on lividity?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Have you read this passage, sir?
Yes.
Does it comport with your view of what you can determine in terms of time of death based on lividity?
Objection, hearsay.
Counsel, let me see it sidebar without report. Thank you, counsel. Proceed.
All right, and with respect to the issue of stomach contents, their examination for the purpose of determining time of death, sir, counsel pointed out to you that the interpretation of the variations between the extremes of an empty stomach and a full stomach had to be left to the doctor.
That's correct.
In your experience, sir, is there a fixed rate at which people digest their food?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope. Second objection, beyond the scope of the witness's expertise.
Sustained.
Okay. What are the variations in your experience, sir, with respect to the determination of time of death based on stomach contents?
Objection, same objection.
Overruled. His experience.
That it takes approximately from 4 to 6 hours to complete the digestion process.
So there's a 2-hour time range in there for variation?
Leading suggested.
Sustained.
So is there a variation between individuals as to how fast or slow they'll digest?
Yes.
You indicated, or just now, 4 to 6 hours?
There's a 2-hour variation then, yes.
And what are the factors that can cause that variation of 2 hours between individuals?
Objection, no foundation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
One factor may be the state of excitability or lack thereof that the individual is in at the time that he's digesting food. Again, it's just a very general general statement as to digestion.
Mr. Cochran referred to Mr. McNally on August 27th going into Nicole's condominium with you, and he mentioned Mr. McNally trying on a knit cap that he pointed out.
Yes.
Did you ever see him do that?
No.
What would happen to trace evidence, such as hair or fiber, on that cap if someone else, an investigator, tried it on?
Be compromised.
What do you mean by that?
A true reading of any trace evidence that was on that cap prior to him putting on his head couldn't be made.
Might his hairs get on the cap?
Certainly.
Might other hairs that are on the cap that are of evidentiary value get lost?
Yes.
Did you try on the ski cap that was found at the feet of Ron Goldman?
No.
Did you try on the glove?
No.
Would you ever do such a thing?
No.
Is that something that you would do if you thought an item had any evidentiary value at all?
Never.
Now, the blood on the front walkway, sir, based on what you could see, what was the source of that blood?
In my mind, the source of the blood was Nicole Brown Simpson.
And did it go, that flow pretty much all the way down the walkway?
Yes, it did.
Was there any blood flowing from Ron Goldman onto the walkway?
None that I could observe.
Objection, speculation.
None that I could observe.
Did you see any shoe prints in blood on the front walkway?
There were partial shoe prints between the two victims on the walkway. I saw nothing to the east of the gate leading down to the sidewalk.
Right, okay. What, yeah, I'm talking about, did you see any shoe prints in blood leading away from the bodies down the walkway towards the sidewalk?
No.
Were you ever able to avoid the blood on the walkway from the point of the sidewalk up to the gate leading to the bodies, that front walkway, unless you stepped through the grass and the shrubbery?
Objection, form that question, Your Honor. Leading suggested vague.
Sustained leading.
How, did you walk up to the bodies in the shrubbery, sir?
Yes.
Did you observe the walkway?
Yes.
Could you see a way of walking on that walkway without stepping in blood?
There were ways to do that, yes.
And how were you able to do that?
Assumes fact, objection, assumes fact, nine evidence.
Sustained.
Did you do that?
Generally, initially I did not. There were areas on the walkway that there were no blood.
Could you tell whether there were enough of those areas that if someone wanted to, they could step between the blood spots and on the clean areas of the walkway?
Objection, Your Honor, speculative.
Or will.
Certainly.
Could you do that in the dark?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation, speculative.
Sustained.
Were you able to see those clean spots on the front walkway without your flashlight?
I was, yes.
And at what time were you there?
I arrived approximately 4:30 a.m.
Can you describe how difficult or easy it would have been to walk down that walkway without stepping in blood?
Objection, form of the question, Your Honor. It's compound.
Calls for speculation.
You were able to see where the clean spots were, sir?
Yes,
How were you able to see that?
by looking.
Okay. Were you able to see what kind of path you'd have to take to avoid the blood on the front walkway?
It was very evident to me which paths to take in order to avoid the blood.
Okay. Could you just walk one foot in front of the other and walk straight down the walkway?
Objection,
No.
Your Honor. This has been asked and answered.
Or will.
No.
What kind of path would you have to take to avoid the blood on the front walkway?
You would have to step where there is no blood.
And how difficult or easy was that?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
At this point, overruled.
To me, there was no great difficulty in doing that if one were to look where one was walking.
To step carefully.
That's correct.
Objection to the last statement.
Overruled. Overruled.
And do you know how you take pictures of invisible shoe prints?
No.
Did you recall the black Jeep that you found parked in the rear driveway of 875 South Bundy?
Yes.
Did any defense investigators ask you for pictures of the tires of that black Jeep?
No.
And did you determine who that black Jeep belonged to?
Yes.
Nicole?
That's correct.
Pleadings against objection. It's not a conference.
Withdrawn?
Withdrawn.
Thank you.
Did any defense investigator ask to examine the tires of that Jeep?
Objection. Hearsay, Your Honor.
Overruled.
And scope.
Overruled.
No.
Now, the coins that you indicated, the penny and the dime,
Yes.
where were they in relation to the Jeep?
They were north of the Jeep and the driveway between the Jeep and the north fence.
And the tire tracks that were pointed out to you that appeared to run underneath those coins, where were they located?
Overruled.
They were located between the Jeep and the north fence.
Was there, now you were there that night, sir, were you not?
Yes.
Was there room to park a car between the Jeep and the fence?
I don't believe there would have been unless it was a very, very tiny car.
People's Exhibit number 52, Your Honor.
All right, sir. Looking at People's 52, to what side of that Jeep did you find the coins?
As you look at the vehicle, it's to the left.
And it was in that area, was it in that area that you saw the, that there were tire tracks?
Objection, leading suggested.
Overruled.
Yes.
Can you tell us, it's kind of dark in this photograph, but to the left of the Jeep, are there any objects that are on that rear driveway in front of the fence?
So 2 trash cans.
Can you, I'm going to use the laser pointer, sir. Tell me if you can see what I'm pointing to. Is this the area where the garbage cans are?
Yes.
And if you can tell in this photograph, if you could direct the red dot, where were the coins and the tire tracks seen?
Up a bit, generally in that area.
Right here?
No, we would be generally in this area.
Can't hold it still for that long.
Down low.
Over here?
Generally, yeah.
Okay. Now, how many feet could you estimate for us was there between the side of the Jeep and those garbage cans?
You could estimate approximately 5 feet.
Indicated a location with the laser that is between the Jeep on the center of the photograph and the fence, which is to its left.
Can I show you the same photograph on Yelmo so it'll be a little bit lighter?
One, please. Main motors, please.
All right, there we go. All right, now looking at this photograph, sir, can you tell us, locate for us where the tire tracks pointed out underneath the coins were in this photograph?
Well, they'd be just, again, to the left of the vehicle.
Just to the left of the Jeep?
Yes.
Go ahead. Can you direct the dot?
Down a little bit, in that general area. I can't tell from here, but it's in that general area.
Right there?
I can't say whether it was right there, again, in that general area between the vehicle and the north fence.
Okay.
Approximately in that area, yes.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, may I print this photograph be marked as People's 52A?
Yes.
Now,
Do we need to switch? Proceed.
did you have any information as to whether, as to where that Jeep was when Officer Risky first appeared on the scene at approximately midnight?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
This is
Beyond
done.
scope.
Beyond the scope. Actually, it goes to tire tracks, or we'll proceed.
My information is that it was found in the location you see it here.
Hearsay, Your Honor.
That is hearsay. What he was told by Risky.
I'm asking to explain subsequent actions, Your Honor. This is foundational.
Well, Officer Risky testified that's what he saw, correct?
Yes, he did.
All right.
Yes, he did.
Other than the color, that's what he saw.
Okay.
Okay.
Did Officer Risky give you some information about where that Jeep was located when he first responded to the scene at midnight?
I believe it came from Detective Phillips.
Did it come to you eventually?
Yes.
And after you learned that, sir, based on that information and your observations at the crime scene, what, if any, evidentiary value did those tire tracks underneath the coins have for you?
None.
And why is that?
Number one, it's a commonly used cement surface where vehicles are parked. There's no way to tell the age of a tire mark, and besides, there was no way that a vehicle could have fit between the Grand Cherokee and the fence that I could see.
So in your opinion, was there any way that those tire tracks could have been associated with the vehicle driven by the suspect?
No.
About that melting ice cream.
I move to strike. Simpson.
What grounds? Whole road.
About that melting ice cream, sir, the experiment that was performed, you saw the photograph of the condition of the ice cream after an hour and 15 minutes?
In my experiment?
Not yours, but the experiment that was conducted.
Yes.
And you recall your observation of the ice cream that you observed at 4:30 in the morning, 4 hours after Officer Risky responded to the scene at 875 South Bundy?
Yes.
How different did the ice cream that you saw 4 hours after the scene was discovered by Officer Risky than it looked in the experiment to you after an hour and 15 minutes?
Objection, objection. The form of that question about the proper foundation.
Sustained. Foundation.
Okay. Did you observe the ice cream in the experiment after an hour and 15 minutes?
Observed the photograph, yes.
You observed what condition it was in?
Yes.
And when you arrived at the scene at 4:30, did you observe the ice cream on the banister in the Ben & Jerry's cup?
Yes.
And did you receive information from Officer Risky concerning the time that he first observed that cup?
Objection, hearsay.
Yes.
And the ice cream that you saw at 4:30 a.m. at 875 South Bundy, how did it look in comparison to the photograph of the ice cream that you saw after it had melted an hour and 15 minutes?
Objection, I'd like to protest on that.
All right, with the reporter. All right, thank you, counsel. Mr. Clark, you may continue. We're about to ask if he compared the photograph with his recollection at 4:30.
Thank you, Ron. Detective Lange, the ice cream that you saw at 4:30 a.m. at 875 South Bundy, how did it look in comparison to the photograph of the ice cream that you saw after it melted for an hour and 15 minutes in the experiment?
Very similar.
Now let me ask you some, Faye Resnick. Did you ever have any information that Faye Resnick was being threatened by drug dealers?
No.
Did you have any evidence to indicate that Faye Resnick owed money to drug dealers?
No.
Do you have any evidence to show that drug dealers had anything to do with these murders?
None.
And was there anything in Faye Resnick's book that caused you to form the opinion that drug dealers committed these murders?
Objection to form that question based upon anything in the book. Objection.
Overruled.
Nothing.
And was there anything in the book that changed your opinion concerning...
Excuse me, counsel. Without the reporter. Here. Ms. Clark.
Did Ms. Resnick's book have any impact on your opinion concerning your theory of this case?
None whatsoever.
All right, so now you looked at all the evidence in this case, is that right?
Yes.
And you've heard all these rumors. In your experience, sir, what is your opinion?
Overruled.
In your experience, sir, what ultimately led you to this defendant?
Objection, Your Honor. I'd like to approach.
Sustained.
We'd like to approach yet.
Let me ask you this, sir. Has Nicole's condominium since been cleaned out and prepared for resale?
Yes.
Has the discovery of any drug items or paraphernalia ever been brought to your attention, recovered from her place?
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Just objection hearsay.
Sustained. Curious to disregard the last question and answer.
Has any evidence of drugs or drug paraphernalia recovered from her condominium been brought to your attention?
Hearsay. Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Has evidence been brought to you, Detective Lange, recovered from Ms. Nicole Brown's condominium consisting of drugs or drug paraphernalia?
Objection, hearsay.
That's not hearsay. Overruled.
No.
Other than rumor and innuendo, have you recovered any evidence that causes you to believe this is a drug-related murder?
Object, Your Honor. This is argumentative.
Sustained.
After the examination of the evidence in this case, sir, what evidence is it that causes you to believe that this is not a drug-related murder?
Object, Your Honor. Ask and answer.
Sustained.
Can we approach, Your Honor?
I thought we asked that question once already.
May I have a moment? Did you, in the course of your investigation, sir, I think you indicated that you had the area around Nicole Brown's condominium examined for unusual vehicles?
Object, outside the scope. Objection, outside the scope.
Appears to be. Where we
Can we approach?
link it
Your
up?
Honor? I will.
Proceed.
Did you do that, sir?
I caused that to be done, yes.
Did you locate the car, did you locate a car that was associated with either of the victims parked on the street near her condominium?
Hearsay, Your Honor, outside the scope.
Overrule. I'm going to overrule at this point, but I assume you're going to link this up.
I am.
All right.
There was one located, yes.
And what was that?
A vehicle driven to the location by Mr. Goldman parked on Dorothy Street, south of the Bundy location,
Facing which way on Dorothy?
facing west.
Were you aware of...
Objection being, suspect not evidence. Got there.
Overrule.
And where did Ron Goldman live in relation to the Mezzaluna and Nicole Brown's condominium?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
Was the
Let me
court
see
like me to
counsel
approach?
without the court reporter, please. All right, Ms. Clark?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Keys?
Yes, that's where I wanted to go. Thank you, Your Honor. You recall the keys that were found near the body of Ron Goldman, sir?
Yes.
Were those keys checked to find out what, if anything, they opened?
I'd like a little more foundation to objection, give foundation.
Sustained. Rephrase.
Did you check those keys, sir, to determine whether or not they fit any cars in the area?
I checked in with the owners, with the owner of the keys, yes.
Okay. And what did those keys fit?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustained. Did you
Did-
do that personally?
No, Your Honor.
Did you have that done under your, at your request?
The keys were not physically used to check the vehicle. They were at,
Ask and answer.
Overruled. That's overruled on that ground. Proceed. They were not physically checked.
they were identified by the owner of the vehicle and the keys to me.
Hearsay.
And
That's
what-
hearsay.
Move strike.
All right, that'll be stricken. Juries to disregard.
Was that vehicle moved from the location, sir?
It was impounded, yes,
Was it towed away?
yes.
And what happened to the keys that were found near the body of Ron Goldman?
They were ultimately turned over to their owner.
Who was?
First name was Andrea. I would have to look. Her last name escapes me at the moment.
Okay. Did you speak to her, sir?
I interviewed her, yes.
She a friend of Ron Goldman's?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Did you attempt to determine what, when you gave those keys back to her, did you ask her questions about what they were, whether she recognized them?
Objection, hearsay.
Whether or not it was asked is not hearsay.
Yes, I did.
And did she identify those keys to you?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
She gave you information concerning those keys, sir?
Yes.
Hearsay.
Sustained.
She gave you information?
Counsel, move on.
Did you ultimately determine whether those keys fit the vehicle parked on Dorothy?
Yes.
Judge, this one, hearsay.
That's hearsay. He said he didn't do it. Is the owner of the car available?
Yes, Your Honor, she travels
Thank
outside
you.
the country.
Thank you.
The keys found near Ron Goldman's body, you released them to her?
Yes,
Is that based on what she told you?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Overruled.
yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Madam Reporter, do you need to change paper?
Your Honor, maybe I can say some time. That's it. Detective Lange?
You wouldn't be disappointed if I didn't ask any other questions, would you?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So you would not be disappointed if I don't ask any other questions, would you?
No, sir, I would not.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Detective, thank you very much.
Your Honor, before he leaves, one-
Yes.
No questions for him.
Oh.
May we approach with the reporter? There's a couple things. Well, you want to take your one, and I want to...
I need one other thing.
Yes, please.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, before I release Detective Lange, I just wanted to re-instruct you as to something that occurred during the course of Detective Lange's testimony. During the course of his testimony the day before yesterday, the Detective Lange was asked questions regarding scientific tests performed on the blood under the fingernails of Nicole Brown Simpson, and Detective Lange stated that gave certain answers as to how that impacted his investigation. You are instructed to disregard that question and answer the topic of DNA testing, and the results of that DNA testing will be presented at a later time through expert witnesses, so you should disregard that question and answer. All right.
May we approach now?
Can I let Detective Lange go?
Yes.
I'd feel much happier.
Yes, I'd feel much happier.
All right. Detective, thank you very much. Your excuse, sir. Subject to recall, of course.
Yes, Steve. Still on call, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.